Hello and welcome back to Politics on the Prairie. I'm your host, Dan Williams, and today we'll be going over some of the suburbs in the Oklahoma City and Tulsa areas, as well as some of the mid to smaller sized cities across the state of Oklahoma that I've got mapped out. So, we're going to start with my home turf here in Edmond, Oklahoma. We're going to be looking at the 2024 presidential election, and just a brief aside about how these areas have voted in the previous few presidential elections, as well as a shift between 2020 and 2024. But here we have the city of Edmond. We can see that it's quite red, voting for Trump by 20 points, just over 20 points here. However, if we look here through the previous presidential elections, we can see Edmond has gone from being extremely red here in 2020 or 2012 rather, R plus 45, all the way to R plus 20 here in 2024, with a 5-point shift in almost all parts of Edmond towards Democrats between the 2020 and 2024 elections. So Edmond, very historically Republican area, absolutely, but is bolting left. This is where I spent a lot of my time growing up, so I can tell you, very highly college educated cities. We can see here 54%. So definitely as the education realignment hits across the nation, Edmond is one of those areas that's primed for it. So we're going to now move south to Moore. Here we have the city of Moore. We can kind of see that it voted similar to Edmond, though it voted a little bit to the left of in 2012, voted to the right of Edmond in 2024, but still moved a little bit to the left, seeing most precincts in the city of Moore moving 2 points to the left towards Democrats, and then voting for Trump by 26 points here in 2024, whereas in 2020 it voted for Trump by 28. So a moderate shift left, definitely not as educated as Edmond at 28%, very close to the state average there, but certainly an area that is being influenced by the suburban shift going on across the nation. And again, as I've pointed out in other things, remarkable this shifted left while the entire country shifted towards the right. So definitely some interesting things going on there. We're going to look now to the even further south. We're going to cover the city of Norman. I debated whether or not putting this off into its own deal, and we may still do that. I do have the wards of Norman drawn here. This is our first city we've covered so far in this video, where it's shifted a little bit towards the right. Now this may be a little shocking because Norman's pretty known well for having a lot of blue in it here in downtown Norman, where West and East Norman are red, but not nearly as red as we see in other cities. Certainly, though, we are now down to a 7-point win, down from a 9-point win in 2020. You see there a little bit more spread out. But, even Romney won this city here in 2012 by about 5 points. So while not as consistent shift to the left, we've seen still shift there. But one thing to point out, as we pointed out in Oklahoma City and Tulsa areas, Norman had a turnout drop here, and as we can see, most of that turnout drop is focused here in the Democratic areas, speaking more to a disaffected Democratic base. Now, my prescription is that these are more Democratic-leaning unaffiliated voters rather than Democratic registered Democrats. But we'll have to go into more of the data to really parse that information out. But the fact that it's around this area where you do see a high preponderance of independents, or rather unaffiliated registered voters, does speak a little bit to that theory. So a little bit shift to the right. I think it's definitely recoverable. Less of a right shift in the entire nation, and almost purely prescribed to turnout. Now we're going to look at some of the other areas in the Oklahoma City metro here. I'm going to bring up Yukon. So very, very red suburb, sort of exurb area of, West in the western OKC region, voted for Trump by 37 points here, so still very red. But compared to Romney, where you see, it voted for Romney by 55 points, there's definitely a reduction there. We can actually see here between these two elections that Reps only gained about 50 votes here, while Democrats have gained about 1,200 votes. So a lot of new movement into the Yukon area seems to be more Dem leaning, though certainly there's still quite a few Republicans there. You see nearly 5-point shift towards the Democrats between the 2020 and 2024 election, and you do see a turnout increase as well, modest turnout increase of 1.35% there. Now we're going to head down to its sister city of Mustang. Mustang down here, as we can see, still incredibly Republican. R plus 45, about as red as Edmond was in 2020, or 2012 rather. And then you go back in its history, and it's even much redder. It's almost R plus 60 here. We have lower bachelor's attainment here, so not shifting nearly as much as Edmond overall, but still experiencing democratic shifts and much higher turnout shift here. We can see some precincts increasing their turnout by double digits here, especially in the western Mustang area. That's definitely growing in population if we look at the American Community Surveys. So we will parse out here and we'll look at other parts of the metro. Let's take a look at, let's see, 14, no, excuse me. Let's look at 15. This is Nichols Hills. Much smaller community. We're only dealing with a few thousand people here, but definitely interesting to look at because it is Oklahoma's wealthiest city. And we can see here this place is just bolted left in this last election, going from R plus 20 to R plus 12, shifting 8 points towards Democrats, having a big turnout increase too. And this area, used to be incredibly Republican, voting for Romney by almost 50 points. So definitely interesting to see that shift quite largely, going from R plus almost 50 to R plus 12. A huge shift over 12 years there. Really high bachelor's attainment, and of course, very wealthy area here. If you look at its neighbor to the north, we have the Village. Kind of a similar story here, though a more muted shift towards Democrats. About 2.5 points here from the last election, going to R plus or D plus 9 rather. And we can see here that it has been consistently shifting towards the left, voting for Romney by almost 23 points here, a little bit over 23 points here in 2012, and then shifting to the left continuously there. Again, you have very high bachelor's attainment at 50.78 or 76%, so definitely that's influencing it some here as we see the ED realignment. We'll go to Del City next. And really important factor here in Del City, or really important thing that we would like to highlight here in Del City, is that Del City, according to estimates, and again, disaggregated absentee vote and taking into account some city lines here, though Del City's city boundaries are pretty neat actually, Democrats, Kamala Harris managed to flip the city of Del City. So, while not the largest suburb in the Oklahoma City area, definitely important that we see Del City consistently shifting towards the left here in the last few elections. The turnout decreased a bunch though, going down by almost 4.5%. It's generally a lower turnout city overall. So we can see here, bachelor's attainment is fairly low at 14%, but consistently shifting to the left, 2.63% here. And I've been told that, Del City is sort of Trump country, but that doesn't seem to be the case here since Kamala Harris flipped it in 2024. We'll look at its neighbor, Midwest City. Midwest City is kind of the inverse of Del City here. Had a great big Republican shift at 4.2%, and unfortunately for Democrats, flipped back towards Trump here. But as we can see here, it probably is another turnout issue, as we can see here in the more Democratic-leaning precincts in the western parts, and especially in the northern parts of the city, dropped in turnout here, so around 7 or 8%. And one of the more Republican areas of the city definitely had turnout increases here in the eastern parts. So it definitely, Midwest City still on the knife edge here, only R plus 2 where it was D plus 2, right? So definitely still a very toss-up-y city. And, again, you have lower bachelor's attainment and a little bit less wealthy, so not necessarily bachelor's, not necessarily education realignment here. It's more so it's a very diverse city. While this, 59% white, that's like 8 points less than the state. A very large black population, about 3 times the black population see statewide. So definitely a much more diverse area than you would usually see, and that it does seem to be getting blacker as people from the east side tend to move into this northern area here. Then you have its neighboring community of Spencer. Spencer, we see a huge turnout drop of almost double digits here. But even then, you see a slight Democratic shift as we see a lot of Republicans drop off, even as you see a lot of Democrats drop off. But it has remained fairly consistent. Super majority Democrats, a majority black community at 1488 black residents over 2,900. So just over 50% there as far as that black population goes. Very rural area, but still tucked in there right next to Oklahoma City. So one area that we're definitely looking at. And then we're going to go to Bethany here in the kind of West OKC area. I'm going to do a quick consolidation of blocks here so I can get a better look at a couple of things. Get the ping processing there. But as we can see here in Bethany, it's we have the shift thing on. It's very red, but it's been getting, bluer kind of stagnated here in 2020, or 2024 rather, but shifted it just a bit to the Dems. Turnout went down a lot, by almost 7.5 points. But then again, you look at the 12-year shift here, and again, you're seeing, area that voted for Romney by 43 points going down to R plus 20, almost similar to Edmond, around R plus 19 actually. So definitely a huge shift there. Now Bethany is a little unique, even though it has a large university on campus. There's pretty low bachelor's attainment across the city. So definitely some interesting things going on under the hood there. There's a very critical mayoral election coming up there, where I think Amanda Sandoval has a very good chance of winning. So we'll definitely see what happens there on election night here coming up pretty soon. Here we have War Acres, kind of same story here. It's a little bit wider than Bethany is, but a little bit more, a lot less population, but more Democratic, absolutely. It was held by Democrats, narrowly flipping Democrats in 2020 and being retained by Democrats in 2024. Great big turnout drop, though, of 8% here. I mean, huge turnout drop. While that doesn't constitute, too many votes, it's around 600. It's still very interesting. You see these urban areas dropping in turnout overall by huge amounts. So that's a story in a lot of Oklahoma City area suburbs here that we can see. Now we're gonna zoom out here. We're gonna go out into the Tulsa area. Now I will say I don't have all the Tulsa suburbs mapped out as I would like, but I do have a lot of the larger ones here. So we'll take a look here at Broken Arrow, large Tulsa suburb. We can see here Broken Arrow, very Republican, R plus 27, right? But still shifted a little bit to the left, with about 3 points to the left here, and has been consistently shifting to the left over the last few election cycles here. Voting for Romney by almost 50 points, going down to R plus 27 here, or 30, excuse me, 33, excuse me. So definitely still really Republican, but you are seeing those shifts happen all across the city, really. So definitely a little uniform shift there. It's less bachelor educated than Edmond is. That's why the shifts are probably a little less dramatic here, but still a healthy amount of 33.77%, more than the state, absolutely. Definitely a lot wider than the state as a whole, but a growing Latino population across Broken Arrow there, and very high turnout overall, with a little bit of a turnout dip between elections. We'll zoom out here. We can take a look at Owasso up in the north part of Tulsa. Again, super Republican suburb, as you see in all the Tulsa suburbs, really. Voting for Trump by almost R plus 40, so definitely still very Republican, but you do see a decrease for Republicans, consecutively in these elections here. Going from Mitt Romney, I almost said John McCain, there by almost 50 points, and then going down to R plus, so that's about 39 there, more or less. So it's been moving a lot slower than the other ones, but decently educated here. It's growing very quickly. Very high turnout here, as we can see, and overall turnout growth. So an area that's growing overall. Now we'll go take a look at neighboring Jinx. Excuse me. Here you actually see a bit of a Republican shift. And I know Tomahawk Strategies has been a very far-right campaign consulting firms been active in this area, working on Republican politics in the Jinx region, which might explain some of its shift back here. But even still, the nation shifted 6 points to the left or to the right. So the fact that they maintained this is a bit of a glimmer of hope for Jinx area Democrats here. If we can see here, around R plus 38, down from R plus 53 in 2012. So certainly overall moving in that direction. And this area, much is very highly educated, 44%. So definitely very up there. Take a look at Bixby real quick before we move out of the Tulsa area and cover some other areas. Again, another high education, 45.76%. Much better than the other Tulsa suburbs. Still, Republicans getting 70% of the vote here, but this area is not immune to the shifts that are going on overall. As we can see here, almost 5-point shift left from the last election, with Republicans winning this by, R plus 43, down from R plus 59. So definitely a smaller shift overall, but definitely still shifts going on here in the Bixby region. So it's a small city, about 21,000 voting age population, 27 I think thousand overall population. So certainly an area that is changing. Now we're going to zoom out and cover some of the other areas in the city or the state of Oklahoma. We're going to go out east here real quick and look at these kind of eastern nexuses of Fort Gibson and Muskogee and Tahlequah. So looking at Muskogee, this is an area that's shifting towards Republicans as a lot of black people move out of this area. We can see the turnout dropped, minor shift towards Republicans, but we can see overall, Romney winning it by 5 to go Trump to winning it by 20. So definitely not doing very well for Democrats here as it gets less black, and as a lot of the ancestral Democrats we have in this area stop voting for Democrats. And kind of the same story in Fort Gibson. It was much redder obviously, but certainly was bluer back in time here, and then got redder overall as we marched forward in time. Tahlequah is a bit of a different story. We can see certainly was closer previous, but then it was much redder in 2016, but then kind of came back towards Democrats in 2020 with a slight Republican shift in 2024, sticking around R plus 10. Now we do have, a major university here in northeastern state. You have other universities here in Muskogee, but arguably this is more of a college town here, and of course this is the heart of Cherokee Nation, which plays a big influence in the city's politics from what I hear. So that might be keeping it more stabilized. Certainly if we look at the demographics here, only 46% white and 31% native. So it's a majority minority. A very interesting, minority coalition here in Tahlequah that you don't find in other places in the country. So we're going to zoom out here, and we're going to go north. We're going to look at the city of Bartlesville. Anyone familiar with Bartlesville knows that we have a lot of local Democrat electeds, or state legislators rather, from this area. A super Republican area, oil town, a little bit higher educated here, as you can see, 32%. But similar to Owasso, this area is slowly shifting towards Democrats, as we can see here. Going from R plus 45 in this election to R plus 40. So it's definitely a much slower shift than we've seen in other areas, and only a 1-point shift towards Democrats here. Kind of smattered about here across the city of Bartlesville, but consistent, right? And usually, you see this a couple of slow shifts towards a party, and then it might just bolt or it might stagnate and reverse. But definitely, Bartlesville has shown a lot of activity on the ground. The Washington County Democrats are getting particularly well organized there. So definitely an area to watch. Now we're going to dart over to kind of the north central part of the state. We'll cover Ponca City, then Enid, then go down to Stillwater, which has been in the news recently. But first with Ponca City, an old oil town, a very red area. Romney winning it by 37. Then Trump winning it by 42 in 2016, and then back to 43 in 2020 actually shifted towards Democrats a bit. Now only R plus 40, lower educated only 18%, post oil town. You got the Burbank Shale over here, but still a bit of Democrat representation here, 2,500 votes or so. They increased their totals while Republicans decreased theirs. So interesting to note there, especially during a year in which Republicans did so well. And of course, turnout went a little bit down here. Now we move towards Enid, my original hometown. If there's one thing I can say about Enid, it is incredibly consistent, right? 2673, 2270, 2472, 2573, right? Each shift is, it's very minor. And Democrats hover around 4,000. Enid goes from, 11,400 here to about 12,000, back down to 11,900 here. It is almost a town trapped in stasis, right? It's much wider than the state usually is at the voting age population level. 51,000 overall population, then 38,000 voting age population. About, a little less educated than the state is as a whole. Unique community, actually a large Pacific Island community, Marshallese, for those who know, down here in central Enid. So definitely a voter group that doesn't get reached out to a lot. Potential vector maybe for people to engage. And of course, recently they dealt with a Nazi problem with the city councilor from this southern area of the town being a part of the Identity Europa movement that they then recalled and kicked out of office, thanks to the Garfield County Democrats and the Enid Social Justice Coalition. So even though the town's very stagnant, there are some things going on under the hood, as we can see here with the shift. Various parts of the town shifting left and right. Now, for those of you who like orange, we're going to cover Stillwater. Very similar size to a town and population to Enid. A little bit more voting age population because it is a college town. You'll have a lot more 18-year-olds there, right? And here we can see, it shifted just barely to the Republicans, really stayed even, but still won by Republicans, R plus 3, R plus 3 in this election as well, but it's gotten more competitive. Really, the story in Stillwater is overall is that it has very poor turnout. And where's that poor turnout? It's on the campus. You've got a lot of people who are maybe registered somebody else, but you also have a lot of independents here, unaffiliated voters that are registered and they don't vote at all. I don't know if it's an outreach problem. It's certainly something I've been trying to interrogate over the last few years, but definitely, I believe those independents are more left-leaning than they are anything else. If they turned out at a higher rate, I think you'd see Stillwater firmly in the hands of the Democrats rather than the Republican control it sees right now. But we can see here, Republicans from 2020 lost about 400 votes or so. Democrats lost about 400 votes as well. So very consistent changes, or very consistent coalition we have there in the city of Stillwater, bluer downtown than it is on these outskirts. So we'll zoom out here and then we're going to cover two more cities. I think we'll wrap up then. I'm going to go down here into the Ada area, another college town with a large East Central University here. Going to here, but also this is, almost at the start of what you would call Little Dixie. I don't think people would generally draw it out this far, but definitely getting into southeast Oklahoma. So we can see here, very red overall, a shift to the right of 2 points, almost, 1-for-1 with the turnout shift going down here, especially in the more Democratic leaning central precinct here, dropping around 10% or so. But, overall it's kind of stayed stable. It's back to kind of where it was in 2012. It's a little about the same, but some changes going on under the hood. Now we are going to the much maligned but a special place in my heart, the city of Lawton. Now, I better not hear any disrespect about the city of Lawton. This place is where my grandparents spent most of their lives. You got the large military base here up in Fort Sill. And while there are, definitely some structural issues here for Democrats, it's not a city that I think should be given up on like some people say. Now, as we can see here, Lawton is always close, right? Even in the worst case scenario in 2016, it was only R plus 11. With other elections, it hovering around, R plus 7 in 2012, R plus 6 in 2020, then R plus 7 again in 2024, with a modest right shift between the elections. Now, turnout shift, we can see a lot of Lawton, lower turnout here, with higher turnout on the edges here in these areas. So definitely a place that struggles with turnout at only 30%. Now, of course, that's skewed a little bit by the base numbers. With a lot of these soldiers, of course, not being registered to vote in the state of Oklahoma or not voting at all because they're, busy being soldiers. But certainly a lot of the more democratic areas of of Lawton also experience chronic turnout problems, as well as we can see here as we hover over the precincts in Lawton. Now, Lawton is also a very racially diverse city. We can look at voting age population. We can see it says all white, but if we highlight black folks, we can see that black folks, they are prevalent in one precinct, but they also have existence in a lot of other precincts as well. That's the black population of Lawton is concentrated in the town, but it's dispersed throughout the entire town. And we can also see that it has a lower bachelor's attainment overall than the state by about 5 points or so. But definitely, not a place we should be giving up on. I think it's the 5th or 6th largest city. We need to be contesting it here because it's important, right? But I know I spoke fast during this, but there was a lot of things to cover. I'm going to be brainstorming some ideas for my next video, but certainly this election manifested in different, and in some similar ways across the state of Oklahoma in certain cities. And there are definitely some things I hopefully put on the radar for you here to look out for as our coalitions change in the state of Oklahoma and some of our areas outside of Oklahoma City and Tulsa proper. Thank you very much for watching today and tuning in. My name has been Dan Williams. I've been your host with Politics on the Prairie, and I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.